Greetings everyone, and welcome back to the bench. On the bench, we have a new product. Douk Audio Make Hi-Fi Affordable. Knob sound, something sound. H7 Pro. So yeah, new product to be released here shortly. They sent it to me a month or two ago. It's been sitting around. I better get reviewing this thing. I'm supposed to release this video here soon. So yeah, a new product, new amplifier here. Hang on a sec, let me get it out of the packaging. Okay, we have one of these small class D amps. Has the analog meters, balance and volume. Power switch here has XLR and RCA, so you can switch the different inputs. Has the balance type XLR inputs. That seems to be the latest audio fad, is to have balanced inputs on your amplifier. It's got some mass to it. We will open it up. Kind of got the stylish curved sides to the case. There's the XLR inputs, RCA. They have a cap over them right now. I'll take those off. And of course the speaker and power, 24 to 48 volts input. See what we have on the bottom here. Come on, we can get a focus on that. Those are adjustments for the meter, so you can calibrate them. What else do we get here in the package? We get the manual. It's printed on heavy cardstock. And so they're providing the power output ratings at different voltages and different load impedances here. Seem to be more realistic, but we'll check those. And it seems a little high for 24 volts. And we have the specifications, what they're calling parameters here. I'll just scan down through those real quick. They're providing a 32 volt 5 amp supply, so that's what we'll use to test this thing with. Okay, let's hook it up, see what it sounds like. Of course, we'll do a bunch of measurements and open it up, see what makes it tick. Okay, got it hooked up. Power is on. Music source, YouTube safe music. Give it a quick listening test. Of course, you can't really tell from these camera microphones and all that, but yeah, I'm judging from my own ears. So if we turn this on, I can hear a relay click. And I forgot to remove my clock from the wall. You can hear that ticking in the background. I need to get a quiet one. But I want to set it for RCA. And we will let it play here. It sounds pretty good to my ears. I listen to it more than what I'm showing on the camera, of course. I don't want to sit there and, run the camera for a long time. But as far as noise, just, my usual, stick my ear up to the tweeter and listen to the noise. Very quiet amp. Shouldn't have an issue with more sensitive speakers using this amp. Yeah, I could measure the noise, but it's just quick enough to put my ear up, and yeah, I can tell the difference between a noisy amp and a quiet one. So yeah, pretty impressive. Sounds good. Noise level is really low. I really like these meters. Yeah, this is pretty cool, those little meters there with the amber backlight. Okay, it's time to send this thing to the asylum, the Quant Asylum. We'll get some measurements off of it here. So I have it hooked up to the load, and of course I have it hooked up to the Quant Asylum. Because it's bridged, I have to connect it in differential mode, because I can't connect it to the ground, because being bridged, you don't want to do that. You'll short one side of the output. So important to remember if you're going to measure one of these bridged amps. Okay, to start off, we'll measure it at 1 kilohertz at a low level. I have it set here to measure power at 8 ohms. And right now it's doing pretty well, 0.01%. Well, that's not too bad at a normal listening level. Okay, I'm cranking up the amplitude here. Let's see where the clipping point is. Yeah, it's clipping right there. At 30 volts peak, which is exactly what I'd expect for using a 32 volt supply. So we'll take that down a bit. Take that out of clipping. Yeah, that's good enough. So distortion is at 0.2% now. And we're at 48 watts. I can fine tune that. I gotta reach over on the bench here to the volume control and turn it up just a bit. Okay, so that's about as high as I can get it. And it's putting out 52.4 watts at 8 ohms. And let's check it at 4 ohms. Okay, well, I'm running into the same problem measuring 4 ohm loads, both channels driven. The supplied power brick cuts out. It overloads the power brick and shuts it down. So I can only measure one channel. So yeah, we're switched to 4 ohms now. This still says 8 ohms. I didn't set it here. You can set it to say 4, but I had just have to double this number. And that would be the 4 ohm rating. So that'd be what, 96 watts, around 96 watts. Another thing I'm looking at here is the balance control. You can see if I adjust it, turning it towards the left or the right side drops down. Centered is a very slight discrepancy. You can see the red channel or the right channel just peaks very slightly above. It's not really either here nor there, but if I slightly offset it, you can balance it out. That's pretty well balanced out there. Okay, I'm measuring frequency response from 20 to 20 kilohertz. You can see the discrepancy there. That's the balance control. But it's pretty good. Yeah, it's about a dB down at 20 hertz. And it actually peaks up just a little bit. That must be the action of the output filters. So let me switch it to 4 ohms. This is 8 ohms, of course. Okay, 4 ohms. So you can see that roll off. But then you can see it's rolling off at the high end. And it's a little less than a dB down. Yeah, about a dB down at 20 kilohertz. That's not too bad. If you remember, some of these amps I measured before, around 10 kilohertz, they would just dump. They would just roll off by like 6 dB. Okay, well, I think that's enough measurements. Yeah, I can go crazy with this thing. I'm just scratching the surface of what this thing could do. I could do frequency versus distortion sweeps. I could do power versus distortion sweeps. Probably even export the data and use a spreadsheet to create a 3D distortion graph with power, frequency, and distortion on the different axes. So yeah. But what I want to do now is open this thing up and see how they put it together inside. Did they fix that one issue, that thermal issue I saw with the last Douk audio amp? Okay, this is the amplifier internals. Lots of NE5532 chips around. This seems to be a power supply developing the rails for those op-amp chips. And the output inductors and filter caps. These are Rubicon. There's 5 of them. This one and these 4 are all across the supply rails. You can tell there by following the trace there from the power. These blue ones are Elna caps. I don't really see any issues yet. I gotta look at what's going on under the heatsink though. Well, they did it right this time. The thermal pad, that metal area, is facing the heatsink this time. If you remember, on the other amp, it was facing down, and of course it had the heatsink on the top. So all the heat had to transfer through the epoxy, which according to the data sheet was a much higher thermal resistance. It was, I don't know, it was around 10 degrees Celsius per watt, I think, whereas the thermal pad is closer to 1. So yeah, much better. Big thumbs up for doing it right this time. Yep, that's a 3255 chip. I did notice this diode is crooked here, but I think they did it that way because I can see the component outline is too small for this to fit, so they just kind of put it over and soldered it on to a lead of this transistor. So yeah, it's connected. No issues there. Alright, let me put this thing back together and I'll give the wrap-up numbers on this thing. Okay, the summary of the Douk Audio H7 Pro. So we got around 53 watts into 8 ohms. I'm going to say 90 watts into 4. We measured 96, but that was a single channel. Again, these power supplies they give you, they don't allow me to measure both channels driven without tripping out. I'm just going to say it's going to be around 90. So if you are going to use 4 ohm loads and you like to crank it up high with bass music, with sustained bass notes, it might trip out the power supply there. So, it's not a fault of the amplifier, it's the power supply. So just be wary of that. Distortion measurements. I measured 0.01% at 8 ohms. That's very good to me, good enough. 4 ohm loads, it increased slightly, but it's still pretty low, 0.03. Those were measured at lower power, like around a normal listening level. At higher powers, a few watts under clipping, I was getting 0.12 8 ohms and 0.3 into 4 ohms. Still not too bad, but not nearly as good as at lower power. Frequency response, they seem to have corrected that issue I always run into in measuring these amps. 4 ohm loads, they after 10K they start tapering off, but this one stayed pretty flat, you know, down to -1 dB with the 4 ohm load there. So yeah, that's very good. Thermal issue fixed. Like I mentioned, they have the thermal pad, that little metal area on the chip, facing up to the heatsink. On that other amp, it was facing down, and they were pulling heat through the epoxy, which is not nearly as good. It's about it's an order of a magnitude poorer heat conduction, thermal transfer there. So yeah, that's good. I kind of wonder, do they really listen to me on these amp designs? I like to think so, but I don't know. But yeah, it's fixed on this one. Balanced inputs, I did check these XLR connectors on the back, make sure they were really balanced. I just did a quick test, and yeah, they seem to be authentic. I've heard of some cheap Chinese amps using balanced connectors or balanced inputs, and they're not really balanced. But yeah, they seem to be balanced. Whether you really need that, yeah, it's kind of a, it's is it gimmicky to me? I don't know, maybe a little bit. Do you really need that? Unless you're having issues with regular unbalanced inputs where you're picking up noise, I wouldn't think you'd need balanced. But well, you have that option if you want it. So there you have it, the Douk Audio H7 Pro. I really like the look of the amplifier with the 2 meters with the amber glow there. Kind of the grayish case here. I would say it's probably one of the best ones I've tested to date because, well, number one, it's the first one that doesn't have that frequency response issue if you use it with 4 ohm loads. And, well, compared to the other Douk amp I tested, they fixed that thermal issue where, they're not extracting heat through the epoxy on the chip, which I mentioned previously. So there you have it, pretty good amp. I would certainly recommend this one. Thanks for watching.